So we've argued that the Bible is a story. Well, the question is, how does story work? And this is important. It's almost something that we know intuitively. I've got 3 books here. These are actually the same 3 books that I use in my PhD courses. So we're going to use these books in every course that I start. I need students to understand how story works. And so they're really basic. You may know these books. Little Blue Truck, that's a great book. One of my students actually gave this to me. And Green Eggs and Ham and How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And you're thinking, oh, wait a second. PhD level work, and they're using Green Eggs and Ham. Yeah. Because it's very important to understand how stories work at a very basic level. If you go into a story and you just watched one scene in a movie, would it make any sense to you? Maybe you could draw some principles out of the scene, but you wouldn't know what the scene was doing or how the scene was relating to the rest of the movie. How was it moving the plot? And so stories have main characters. They have a plot. There's a setting. There's a problem. All of these are components of all stories. And so I want to talk to you for just a few minutes about how story works. You may know this, or maybe most likely it's something that you've taken to understand kind of more intuitively. This story, Little Blue Truck. I use this story to make a point that there is an intended application for story. Stories communicate a message. We talked about that in previous videos, that stories communicate a message, and you find it through the moral of the story, and it's through the plot. And so this is a very simple plot line. I could summarize it for you. There's a little blue truck, and he's going through the countryside, and he's greeting all of the different farm animals. You know, he greets the toad, and he greets the cow, and he greets the horse, and he greets all of these different farm animals. And then the big dump truck comes by, right? And so the big dump truck comes blowing through, and he says, look, I'm too important. I've got too many big important things to do. I don't have time to go sit and talk with horses and cows and toads. And so the dump truck goes down the road, and he gets stuck in the mud. He gets stuck in the mud, and the little blue truck comes to help him, but the little blue truck can't push him out. And so all of a sudden, the little blue truck's friends start to show up, one after another, the horse and the cow, and they all show up to push. But it's not until the toad, the very smallest one, comes, and with the help of all of the blue truck and all of the blue truck's friends, the dump truck is pushed out of the mud. And of course, the moral of the story is you're not too big and you're not too important. You never know when you're going to need the help of all of your friends. And so, you know, take the time to make friends, because, you know, you're going to need each other. That's basically what's going on in this little blue truck. It's a story, but it communicates a message. It communicates a truth. That's how story works, right? And here's the problem. You have to identify the story. You have to, you identify the application in light of the plot, the main character, the problem, and the resolution to that problem for the main character. This is a book that most people have read or familiar with, Green Eggs and Ham. But I ask my students all the time. I never have had a student get the interpretation of this book right from the beginning. I ask them, what's this book about? And they say, try new things. And I say, really? Yeah, because he doesn't like green eggs and ham. And I say, well, let's look at this. At the beginning of the book, it's this character. The main character is the main character of a story because he's the one with the problem. And so there's this guy, and he says, I am Sam. That's not the main character. I am Sam. Here's the main character. This guy sitting here, and this I am Sam guy's running around bugging him, and I am Sam. And the main character says, that Sam I am, that Sam I am. I do not like that Sam I am. The problem is he doesn't like Sam. It's not that he doesn't like green eggs and ham. It's he doesn't like Sam. And so Sam says, well, do you like green eggs and ham? And you know the story. I don't like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam I am. I do not like them here or there. I do not like them anywhere. And off the story goes, right? And at the end of the story, finally, this main character, unnamed main character, tries the green eggs and ham. And he finds out that actually he does like them. I want you to take you to the end of the story. And this picture here is really important. It's the main character, still unnamed, with Sam, and they're arm in arm. And it says, I do like green eggs and ham. Thank you, Sam, I am. Now, Sam and the main character are friends. See, the stories begin at the beginning. And the plot, the problem that enters into the story drives the whole story to the resolution. I want you to think about that in terms of the Bible. The setting is Genesis 1 and 2. The main character, the one who is presented with the problem is God. It's not man. It's God. He's created the heavens, the earth, and the sea. He's filled the heavens and the earth and the sea. And he has created man to represent him, to rule on his behalf, to operate according to what's good and right in his eyes, and to rule this creation. The serpent, one of the created beings, comes onto the scene, deceives the man, deceives the woman, and they, from here on, are refusing to represent the Lord, to rule on behalf of the Lord. They're going to rule on behalf of themselves. They're going to do what's right in their own eyes. And so the main character, God's going to fix the problem. And the solution to the problem that is introduced in Genesis chapter 3 is the Christ. It's the seed. It's the seed that will come from the woman. And the plot is developed where there's two sides. There's the woman and the serpent, and there will be enmity between the woman and the serpent. And both the woman and the serpent will have seed. They will have those who represent their interests, who share in their desires. The woman's seed will desire for this promised one to appear and to rule, to restore all that was lost. The serpent's desire is to reject all that is godly, all that God has, and to rule on behalf of him, to rule the nations without God. And that's the enmity, that's this struggle that's going to flow through the whole story, and it's not resolved until Revelation. And so every scene in the story moves the plot. Cain and Abel story moves the plot. The flood narrative moves the plot. The Tower of Babel moves the plot. The Abraham, the Isaac, the Jacob, it's all moving the plot towards a resolution. The creation of the nations, the creation of Israel, all of it is going down the trail of the story. And so it's important that to understand story, that you understand what's the setting, what's the problem, and what's the resolution. I tell my students all the time, stories begin at the beginning, they go to the end, and the middle connects the beginning to the end. The middle scenes in a movie move the plot. They're not standalone scenes that have nothing to do with any of the other scenes. They're moving the plot towards a resolution. And so it is with the Bible. And so one of the problems that we have with Bible interpretation, and maybe my guess is this is why that you don't understand the Bible, is because you've been taught to go into an individual scene, an individual pericope, maybe you've heard it called that. And you go and you look for principles, you look for theological truths that you can apply to your life. But what you don't ask is, how does this scene developing, moving the plot towards a resolution? In the main character, God, you're seeing his character, his compassion, grace, slow to anger, abounding in loving kindness. It's playing out. You're seeing all the characters, how they're functioning, and you're watching the resolve of the main character to bring this story to resolution. And so that's what you're missing in the Bible. The last book that we use is How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and we talk about characters. What are some literary devices? How do storytellers tell story? Well, they still tell story with characters. The plot, the Who's down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot, but the Grinch who lived just north of Whoville did not. And off the story goes, and maybe you've read the book and you've seen the story. But there's characters in here. There's little Cindy Lou who was not more than 2. She's a direct contrast to the main character. And so everything that she does is to highlight how evil the Grinch is. She's pure, she's little, she's innocent, and the Grinch would even lie to her, to little Cindy Lou Who. Think about Cinderella and Cinderella's wicked stepsisters. Everything that the stepsisters are, Cinderella's not. They're selfish. She's self-sacrificing. They're mean. She's nice. They're ugly. She's pretty. All the animals love Cinderella. but the only animal that likes the sisters or likes the mother, the mother's cat's name is Lucifer. Think about that. Lucifer, the cat. So it's Satan cat, but all the other animals love Cinderella. There's this huge contrast. And so that's how characterization works. That's how plot works and plot development works. Symbolism is used in story. And there's symbolism in the Bible. There's this imagery that's going to flow all the way through the story because it's story. It's narrative literature. Now, it's true story. So we're not saying this is a fairy tale. These stories are made up to communicate a point. But the authors of the Bible are communicating true stories, stories that actually happened in history, but they're using the storyteller strategy, the divine storyteller strategy, to communicate these truths because the plot is on the move. The story is heading towards a resolution. And so as we go through these weeks, as you go through the Bible in one session, and we've done some of it here, or when you go through the Bible in a year, following our podcast, this is the approach that we're going to use. And what you're going to find is that all of a sudden, the Bible makes sense. All of those scenes fit together. And so that's our goal for you, that you'd understand the Bible, that you could pick it up and read it and make sense. And then you could apply it to your life. And so that's our goal for you here at Teach Me the Bible.